Alright guys, welcome back to the YouTube. So today we're going to touch on 6 things stopping you from getting ripped. Okay, so my name is Shemi Para, the owner of Para Fitness. We've helped hundreds of guys get shredded, so we know a thing or two about it. But these are the 6 most common things that I see people fall short with when it actually comes to achieving, that lean, athletic physique. So number 1 is your activity, not actually moving enough on a daily basis. If you're trying to reduce body fat, the key is to burn calories, essentially. That's what we want to do. If you're sitting all day, driving a digger in an office, whatever it might be, and you're not really walking, your steps are very, very low. You go to the gym, then you think you're lifting weights, you're trying to burn calories, you do a little bit of cardio. It's not going to cut it. At the end of the day, the most amount of calories that you actually burn is through your NEAT, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And that essentially is when you're walking around, when you're moving, when you're making a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, just by actually moving around on a daily basis. So you want to keep that nice and high. And one of the best things that we can do when it actually comes to reducing body fat is your steps. And that is honestly the key. And I think a good target to have is anywhere, a baseline between that 8 to 10k mark, I think is a really, really good target to have. If you are below that and you actually are stuck for time, then adding in something like a little bit of cardio post-workout, just because you're going to burn some extra calories for a shorter amount of time. But definitely your step count is one thing that I see a lot of people that have very, very low step count, and then they're wondering, why they're, maybe eating a low amount of food, still not reducing body fat, but just by driving up your steps, you'll essentially create more of an energy deficit. Okay? Number 1, your activity. So the second thing then is your environment. And what I mean by environment is the kind of setup that you have. So let's say you come home from work and there's biscuits, there's potatoes, there's crisps, there's donuts lying on the kitchen table. You come home from a hard day's work, from training in the morning. There's a high likelihood that you will reach for those foods and you will consume those foods which don't align with your goals of obviously reducing body fat. Okay, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these kind of foods, but if we are trying to achieve a goal, it's counterproductive to what we're trying to achieve, because in a small couple of biscuits you might have 400 calories, whereas you could have a nutritious salad, you could have a big piece of salmon, whatever it might be. You could have nutritious food that's going to keep you fuller, it's going to help you with your goals, and it's bringing you closer to your goals rather than further away. Yes, you can factor those things in from time to time, but I found that if you're coming home and there's just stuff lying around, it's going to make it 10 times harder again. So we want to make sure that we have a setup that's aligned with the goals that we want. Okay, that we're making it easier for ourselves and not having to come in and rely on willpower essentially to kind of avoid these foods. Then the second thing is like your family and friends. So a lot of the time, and I've heard, and I think work ties in with this as well, where it's like, I had a client and she was basically coming to, so I've had 2 clients. One girl was getting lots of negative comments from an older lady who was way overweight and was just saying, oh, you're too skinny, you need to do this, you need to do that. She's just projecting on her. So you just being able to kind of switch off and know that it's not on you. It's more so them projecting their insecurities on you. That's number 1. And then the second thing is a guy who's in a photo shoot. People were actually coming over and leaving donuts on his work, leaving donuts on his table. Like, that just goes to show the kind of people that they are. So again, there's not much you can do with this, but one thing that I have found, like with friends, family, and obviously colleagues, luckily I never had that issue with work, but what I've said to people to do is just tell them, just be straight with them, be clear with them. If there's a bit of conflict, there's a bit of conflict, but just say, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it, I'm eating healthy food, I want to get into shape, I expect you to respect that. People kind of back off, then they don't expect the confrontation a little bit. But yeah, your environment is obviously huge, because if it's people are kind of coming at you here, friends and family are giving sly remarks, and then obviously your setup at home isn't aligned with it, it's going to be hard. So just making sure that you do set that up. It can be hard, but it's going to set you up for success long term. Then the third thing that we have is tracking. And what I mean by this as well is, like, sometimes you may think you're eating healthy food, or you might think that you're under your calories, whereas when you actually track it, and you don't have to track. This is the thing with tracking. Like, I would recommend doing it for a period of time, but you don't have to do it your whole entire life. It's like anything. You get an understanding of kind of what's in the foods that you're eating. You can then kind of do it by eye. You get into shape, you're happy with where you're at, then you're like, you know what, you can go to a restaurant, you can be like, this is roughly going to be X amount of calories, that drink is roughly around X, because you've tracked, you understand now the protein, the carbs, the fats, and you have an understanding of nutrition. But you're not just going to have that off the top of your head, you need to practice it. So tracking is very, very important. Okay, so definitely do it for a period of time. If you're in a dieting phase, 100% recommend it. But not tracking your liquids. You may be tracking food, or you might be having coffees, cappuccinos, you know, like orange juice, and you might forget to actually track it, and then that can knock you out in a deficit. Okay? Food. Then just making sure that you're, you know, with food when you are eating out and stuff like that, there might be oils and stuff, so you can't actually track that. But a tip when you are eating out is to overestimate it a little bit. So if you think, oh, there's about 400 calories in this, just maybe add on an extra 100 to 200 because there might be cooked in oils. If you don't know how it's prepared, you always have to add a little bit extra, because I'd rather be slightly under in a dieting phase than actually slightly over. Again, the goal is to strip off body fat. And then forget it. if you're not, you know, you might be tracking on MyFitnessPal, but you might actually forget that you ate something. It's happened to me in the past before as well. You might pick up a protein bar, you might have a meal that you actually completely forget to actually track, and then again you're going over on your calories. So making sure that you plan in advance is a key here. Then we're going to move down to number 4, which is too much too soon. And what I mean by that is, you know, you go from 0 to 100. You're trying to then go to the gym from 0 days a week to 7 days a week because you need to shred fat, you need to get really, really ripped really, really quickly, and then you just end up burning out. You don't recover efficiently in between the sessions. You're going from 0 to 100, your body's like, what the fuck's going on? You feel achy, you feel sore, you feel tired, you feel fatigued, and then you just end up falling off. Okay, so not going too fast too soon is key. Start off nice and easy. If anything, start off in the lower, 3 times a week, then up to 4, then 5. You know, 5 is max that you really need to be going, but you can go 6, 7, but obviously just making sure that you're smart with your training then as well. And then too aggressive with the diet. So this is an absolute key. People are going from eating 3,000 calories, overweight, eating shit all day, every day, to then thinking they just have to eat chicken and salad 4 times a day and 1,000 calories. Crash diet. They fucking burn out after, again, a couple of days, and they go straight back to their old ways. So it's like going too aggressive too soon. You want to start off with around a maintenance position, and then slowly start to taper the food down, slowly start to increase the activity up. So you have 2 options: food down, activity levels up. That's creating that deficit that we are looking for when it comes to reducing body fat. And then being impatient. So you didn't get out of shape overnight, so you're not going to get in shape overnight. So this is where you have to be, you know, have some patience, and like, you know, weight mightn't play ball for the first couple of weeks, or you might see a bit of a plateau. That's why it's important, like, not to get too fixated on the weight either. You know, if your habits are in a much better position, you're eating good quality foods, you're in that deficit, you're training, but yeah, your weight isn't playing ball, take pictures as well. You'll see visuals, you'll see visual changes, you'll see how you feel. There's a lot more to it than just a number on the scales. But then again, you know, if you don't see progress within the first couple of days or within the first week or 2, don't panic, just stay consistent and it will happen. This one is a big one which I see happen a lot, and that's your weekends. So, you know, you could be on point all week, 5 days out of the week, you're absolutely smashing it, your diet's on point, calories, training, everything, boom, weekend comes then and you just go absolutely AWOL. You eat way too much food, desserts, ice creams, pizza, the whole lot. You don't train, your steps go really, really down. And what will end up happening is, you know, you make progress all week, you're making really, really good progress, and then on the weekend, you actually undo all of that progress when it comes from a fat loss perspective. Creating a deficit all week, then you overdo it on the weekend, activity comes down, food goes up, and then what happens is that weekly average actually goes up. So you're in a deficit all week, boom, weekend, boom, and then you're actually in a maintenance position or sometimes in a surplus because you've just way overdone it. So making sure you take control of the weekends. And it is nice to have a little bit more flexibility on the weekends. Approach I like to take with my clients as well is like, you know, Monday to Friday when you're in routine with work, stick to, you know, a meal plan, prep your meals in advance. Then even on a Saturday, Sunday, just follow a macros approach where you're hitting your protein and then your calorie targets. So you can have a little bit of flexibility. You can have 1 or 2 meals out. You can, you know, you have a little bit more time. You can start cooking up meals, recipes, whatever it might be. Obviously tracking stuff, but just having a little bit more flexibility with it. Then you get that enjoyment of, you know, eating different foods or eating foods that you're craving on the day. And then you're, and not just kind of eating fucking takeaways for the sake of eating takeaways and then undoing all your week's progress. Okay, so there are 6 things that I think are, you know, common themes that I see and stopping people from actually getting that physique that they want, from getting ripped, from getting abs. So you can dial all of these things in. Of course, being in that deficit is the key, but we're not going to talk about that. There's 6 different topics here. Dial them in, get the results that you want. If you do want to know more about the coaching that I do, the approach that I take with my clients, just click the link in the description and we can set up a chat and see if it's a good fit.